Why the current school model. Conflicts with how humans learn. Most school systems were not designed around psychology. They were designed around efficiency. Modern classrooms are still modeled after the industrial era, where children were grouped by age, taught the same material at the same pace, and evaluated on uniform timelines. That structure works for population management. It does not work for human development. Psychological research shows that learning does not develop evenly. A child may be advanced in math, average in reading, and slower in writing, all at the same time. This is normal brain development, not a flaw. But the current system often interprets uneven learning as a problem to correct rather than a signal to support. When kids are forced to move forward before mastery, they learn to memorize instead of understand. When they're held back in one subject, they internalize shame, even if they're excelling elsewhere. Over time, learning shifts from curiosity to performance. Instead of asking, "What do I want to explore?" kids start asking, "What do I need to do to not fall behind?" This creates anxiety, comparison, and disconnection from intrinsic motivation. Psychology consistently shows that humans learn best when they feel safe, capable, and supported at their own pace. When learning becomes rushed or rigid, the nervous system shifts into survival, and curiosity shuts down. A system built for sameness struggles to nurture individuality, and the cost isn't intelligence. It's confidence, excitement, and long-term engagement with learning. Learning isn't broken. The structure often is. Thank you for learning unconventionally. Like and subscribe to support this channel, and check out my playlists for more self-healing, awareness, and relearning how humans actually grow. Intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Why kids stop wanting to learn. One of the biggest misunderstandings in education is why children stop wanting to learn. Most kids don't lose curiosity naturally. It's conditioned out of them. Psychological research, especially self-determination theory, shows that humans are intrinsically motivated when three things are present: autonomy, competence, and emotional safety. Kids are naturally curious when learning feels like exploration. But when learning becomes about grades, rewards, punishment, or approval, motivation shifts from internal to external. That's the difference between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation sounds like, "I want to understand this. I'm curious. I like figuring this out." Extrinsic motivation sounds like, "I need a good grade. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to look stupid." Here's how this plays out in real life. A child who loves reading may stop enjoying it once reading is tied to timed tests, public comparisons, or pressure to perform at a specific level. The activity itself didn't change. The nervous system response did. Over time, kids learn that effort is only valuable if it's rewarded. This creates perfectionism, procrastination, or avoidance. Not because the child is lazy, but because their nervous system associates learning with pressure. In adolescence, this often turns into burnout or apathy. Students still do the work, but curiosity disappears. They're no longer learning for growth. They're learning for survival. Psychology shows that when kids feel a sense of choice, when mistakes aren't punished with shame, and when progress is measured by mastery instead of speed, motivation returns naturally. The goal isn't to remove structure, it's to remove fear as the primary motivator. Because when learning feels safe, growth becomes self-driven. Kids don't need to be forced to learn. They need environments that don't shut learning down. Motivation doesn't disappear, it adapts to pressure. Thank you for learning unconventionally. Like and subscribe to support this channel, and check out my playlists for more self-healing, awareness, and relearning how humans actually grow. Self-determination theory in schools, families, and real life, one of the most well-researched psychological frameworks for learning and motivation, is self-determination theory. It explains why some people thrive under structure, while others shut down completely. According to this theory, humans need three core things to stay motivated and mentally healthy: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Let's translate that into real life. Autonomy means feeling like you have choice, not total freedom, but a sense that you're participating, not being controlled. In many school systems, autonomy is minimal. Students are told what to learn, how to learn it, when to learn it, and how fast to move, regardless of individual readiness. Over time, this trains compliance instead of curiosity. Competence means feeling capable and improving. But when learning is grouped strictly by age instead of skill level, students are constantly compared. A child may feel behind in one subject and bored in another. Both erode confidence. A student can be advanced in math but struggle with reading. And instead of supporting that nuance, systems often label the student as a whole. That's not how humans develop. Relatedness means feeling emotionally safe and connected. When mistakes are publicly corrected, when questions are met with impatience, or when performance matters more than understanding, the nervous system goes into protection mode. Learning shuts down. This doesn't just happen in schools, it happens in families too. Kids raised in environments where love feels conditional on performance often become adults who tie their worth to productivity. They don't ask, "What do I enjoy learning?" They ask, "What will I be rewarded for?" Psychology shows that when all three needs are met, choice, skill building, and emotional safety, motivation becomes self-sustaining. Not forced, not micromanaged, not threatened. Learning becomes something people return to, even as adults, because growth feels safe again. People don't resist learning. They resist pressure without support. Thank you for slowing down and thinking deeper. Like and subscribe for more daily Virgo reflections on psychology, healing, and unlearning what never worked. There's a foundational concept in developmental psychology called the zone of proximal development, or ZPD. It refers to the space between what a child can do independently and what they can do with guidance. Real learning happens in that zone, not when material is too easy and not when it's overwhelming. But most school systems don't teach to the zone. They teach to the middle. That means some students are bored, some are confused, and very few are actually being challenged at the level their brain needs to grow. When material is too easy, the brain disengages. When it's too hard, the nervous system activates stress responses, freezing, avoidance, or shutdown. Neither state supports long-term learning. From a counseling lens, this creates a pattern we see later in adults. People who equate struggle with failure. People who quit when things feel confusing. People who only feel safe when they already know the answer. They weren't taught how to stay inside productive discomfort. In the ZPD, challenge feels doable, not humiliating. It requires attuned support. A teacher, mentor, or guide who adjusts pacing, explains differently, or scaffolds learning until confidence forms. Age-based classrooms make this almost impossible. One teacher, 30 students, 30 different zones. So students adapt in unhealthy ways. Some overperform and become perfectionists. Some check out and decide learning isn't for them. Some rely on memorization instead of understanding. The tragedy is that none of this reflects ability. It reflects misalignment. Individual-paced learning respects the ZPD by allowing students to move forward when ready, not when the calendar says so. Growth happens when challenge feels supported, not rushed, not compared, not punished. Learning isn't about keeping up. It's about staying engaged. Thank you for being here. Like, subscribe, and explore the Daily Virgo series for grounded insights on psychology, development, and self-trust.
Perfectionism isn't a personality flaw. It's often a learned survival strategy. In many school systems, children learn early that their worth is tied to performance, grades, speed, correctness, and comparison. Mistakes aren't treated as information. They're treated as failure. So the nervous system adapts. Some children become hypervigilant. They double-check everything. They fear being wrong. They equate effort with anxiety. Others learn that rest equals falling behind, so they never truly rest. Over time, this creates conditional motivation. I'll feel okay once I do this perfectly. I'll relax after I finish everything. I'm only valuable if I'm producing. From a counseling perspective, this is where burnout begins. Not in adulthood, but in childhood. Burnout isn't just exhaustion. It's emotional depletion paired with self-pressure. Many high-achieving adults weren't praised for curiosity or persistence. They were praised for outcomes. So when outcomes disappear, so does self-worth. Perfectionism also blocks learning. When the brain is focused on avoiding mistakes, it can't explore, experiment, or take creative risks. The irony is that the very system meant to prepare kids for life often conditions them to fear it. Virgo energy, at its healthiest, refines gently. At its shadow, it overcorrects and never feels done. Healing perfectionism doesn't mean lowering standards. It means separating growth from worth. Children and adults learn best when effort is acknowledged, mistakes are normalized, and rest is not earned but expected. Burnout isn't a lack of resilience. It's a sign the system asked too much too early for too long. You don't need to be perfect to be progressing. You don't need to be exhausted to be successful. Thank you for being here. This is the Daily Virgo.
Why boredom is often misdiagnosed as laziness. Boredom is rarely about a lack of motivation. It's often about a lack of meaningful engagement. In many learning environments, children are expected to move at the same pace, absorb the same material, and demonstrate understanding in the same way. When a child disengages, the label often comes quickly: lazy, unmotivated, distracted, defiant. But boredom is a nervous system response, not a character flaw. For some kids, the material is too slow. For others, it's disconnected from real life. For many, it lacks autonomy. When the brain isn't challenged or emotionally invested, it shuts down. This shutdown can look like procrastination, apathy, daydreaming, or resistance, but underneath it is often unused capacity. Psychologically, boredom is a signal. This environment is not asking anything meaningful of me. Over time, children internalize this mislabeling. They stop trusting their curiosity. They stop initiating. They learn to wait for instructions instead of exploring. In adulthood, this can show up as chronic dissatisfaction, job hopping, or a sense of, I should be doing more, but I don't know what. Virgo energy wants purpose. It wants to be useful, to refine, to improve. When that energy is understimulated, it turns inward, into self-criticism or numbness. Boredom isn't fixed by pressure. It's resolved through choice, relevance, and challenge. When children are allowed to ask better questions, connect learning to real-world outcomes, and move at a pace that matches their processing style, motivation returns naturally. Curiosity doesn't need to be forced. It needs space. And boredom, when listened to, isn't the enemy. It's information. If you've ever felt lazy, ask instead, where was my curiosity ignored? Thank you for being here. This is the Daily Virgo, the hidden cost of being labeled gifted. Being labeled gifted often looks like an advantage, but psychologically it can carry a quiet burden. When a child is praised primarily for intelligence, performance, or being ahead, they may begin to equate worth with outcome rather than effort, curiosity, or resilience. They learn early, I am valued when I excel. This creates a subtle fear, not of failure, but of no longer being exceptional. Many gifted children become perfectionistic. They avoid risks that could expose struggle. They learn to stay in what they're already good at. Growth requires uncertainty, but gifted kids are often rewarded for certainty. Over time, this can lead to anxiety, imposter syndrome, or burnout. In school systems, gifted children may be advanced academically but emotionally undersupported. They may not learn how to ask for help, tolerate frustration, recover from mistakes, so when life eventually presents real challenge, as it always does, the nervous system isn't prepared. Some gifted kids crash in adolescence, others in early adulthood. They may suddenly feel lost, unmotivated, or ashamed for struggling, because struggle was never normalized. Virgo energy thrives on refinement, not perfection. But when giftedness is framed as identity rather than capacity, refinement stops. The child learns to protect the label instead of developing the self. True intelligence includes curiosity, humility, adaptability, and emotional regulation. Gifted children don't need more pressure. They need permission to be average sometimes, to fail safely, and to build skills outside of what comes easily. Because brilliance without resilience becomes fragile, and potential only matures when struggle is allowed. If you were labeled gifted and later felt like you fell behind, you didn't fail. You were never taught how to struggle. This is the Daily Virgo.
Intellectual maturity is not emotional. Maturity, one of the most misunderstood gaps in development, is the difference between being intellectually mature and being emotionally mature. A child or adult that can think deeply, speak articulately, and understand complex ideas, and still struggle to regulate emotions, set boundaries, or tolerate discomfort. Intellectual maturity develops through information. Emotional maturity develops through experience, especially relational experience. Many children who are praised for being wise beyond their years are actually skipping emotional stages. They learn how to analyze feelings before they learn how to feel them safely. This often happens in homes where emotions were minimized, intellectualized, or where the child became the observer instead of the participant. The child learns, I understand what's happening, but I don't know what to do with how it feels. As adults, this can show up as overthinking emotions. Instead of processing them, explaining pain instead of expressing it. Staying composed externally while internally overwhelmed, they may be great at insight, but poor at self-soothing. Virgo energy especially can turn emotions into problems to solve rather than experiences to move through. But emotions don't resolve through logic alone. They resolve through tolerance, repetition, nervous system, safety. Emotional maturity is built when someone is allowed to be upset without being corrected, rushed, or shamed. If a child learned early that being reasonable earned approval, they may suppress emotional messiness to maintain connection. Later in life, this creates exhaustion. You can't think your way into emotional safety. You have to experience being seen while imperfect. True maturity isn't staying calm all the time. It's knowing how to recover, repair, and regulate after disruption. That skill is learned, not innate. If you were always the smart one but feel emotionally behind, you're not broken. You were trained for understanding, not containment.
One of the most common patterns that holds people back, emotionally, professionally, and relationally, is people-pleasing. It often starts in childhood. Maybe you were rewarded for making others happy. Maybe conflict was punished or avoided at all costs. Maybe your needs were consistently deprioritized. The result? You learned that your value is tied to how much you do for others, not who you are. This isn't just about being nice. It's about suppressing your authentic self to maintain approval or avoid rejection. People-pleasing can show up as saying yes when you want to say no, over-explaining decisions, apologizing excessively, overcommitting yourself emotionally or physically. Virgo energy amplifies this because of the desire to be helpful, competent, and reliable, sometimes at the expense of your own needs. But here's the hard truth. People will not always reciprocate. And expecting that they do only reinforces cycles of frustration, resentment, and burnout. So how do you break it? Start small. Practice saying no to minor requests. Observe your discomfort. Validate yourself internally. Approval from others is secondary to your own boundaries. Reflect on your patterns. When do you automatically say yes? Why? Journal reactions. Notice when guilt or anxiety arises and name it. It is not a flaw. It's a learned pattern. The earlier this is addressed, the less it shapes career, friendships, and intimate relationships. People-pleasing doesn't go away overnight. It requires repetition, awareness, and self-compassion. The goal isn't to be selfish. It's to reclaim your energy, your voice, and your authenticity. You cannot give what you do not have. And if you're constantly giving to maintain favor, you're draining your own potential. If you feel compelled to overextend for approval, remember, your presence, your ideas, and your boundaries matter just as much as anyone else's. This is the Daily Virgo.
Hey friends, today we were diving into why one-size-fits-all education can hold kids back, and how recognizing each child as unique learning pace can actually set them up for long-term success. Many school systems operate on a strict grade-level structure. You're expected to be at the same level in math, reading, and history as everyone else, but in reality, kids are often all over the place and maybe 12th grade level in math, 7th grade in reading, and 10th grade in history. And that's okay. Here is what happens when pacing isn't de-individualized. Students who are advanced in one subject get bored and disengaged, losing curiosity. Students who lag in another area feel stressed, anxious, or discouraged, which can impact confidence and motivation. Rigid pacing can delay true growth because kids can T-focus where they naturally excel or need the most support. What individualized pacing looks like. Let kids progress by subject, not by age or grade. Offer flexible assignments or project-based learning that stretch their strengths and support their weaknesses. Encourage self-reflection. Where do I feel confident? Where do I need more practice? Give kids room to explore at their own rhythm, understanding that learning isn't a race. Practical tips for parents and teachers. Notice patterns. My child struggles with reading comprehension but thrives in math. Celebrate progress relative to the individual, not the class average. Use mentorship or peer learning to support growth in areas that lag behind. When we allow children to follow their unique learning rhythm, we protect their curiosity, reduce anxiety, and foster intrinsic motivation, which is the foundation for lifelong learning. Remember, growth isn't linear. The goal is mastery at the child's pace, not conformity to a rigid system.
Another common pattern Virgo energy can experience is performing, the drive to constantly show competence, skill, or achievement. It often begins in childhood. Maybe praise was given only for accomplishments. Maybe mistakes were criticized more than successes were celebrated. Maybe you felt seen only when performing perfectly. As a result, you learned to measure your worth through output rather than being. Performing shows up in daily life as perfectionism, over-preparing or overworking, fear of trying new things for fear of failure, comparing yourself to others constantly. The shadow of performing is exhausting. You might feel like you're always on stage, never able to relax, or that rest equals laziness. But here's the truth. Your authentic self is enough. Your value isn't conditional on what you produce or how flawlessly you do it. Practical steps to break this cycle. Set micro goals for imperfection. Try something without obsessing over the outcome. Notice self-talk. When you catch yourself thinking, I have to do this perfectly, pause and reframe. Celebrate small wins internally. Acknowledgement doesn't need external validation. Practice presence. Engage in activities purely for joy, not achievement. Over time, you'll notice your stress decreases, creativity increases, and your relationships improve, because you're no longer performing to maintain approval. Remember, life isn't a test. The goal isn't to impress. It's to live fully, and let your natural abilities shine without compulsion. Performance is a habit, but it doesn't define you. Your worth is intrinsic. Practice being seen for simply being. This is the Daily Virgo.
Today, we are talking about something modern education often claims to value, but rarely actually teaches well: problem-solving and creative thinking. Most school systems reward getting the right answer, not understanding the process. Kids learn quickly that success means memorizing, repeating, and performing, not questioning, experimenting, or thinking differently. Over time, this trains students to avoid mistakes rather than learn from them. From a psychological perspective, this creates what's called performance-based motivation instead of mastery-based motivation. Kids focus on grades, approval, or avoiding failure, not curiosity or growth. What healthy problem-solving actually requires: tolerating uncertainty, trying something without knowing the outcome, making mistakes, and adjusting, reflecting on why something worked or didn't. But many kids aren't taught how to do this safely. They're corrected too quickly, rescued too fast, or judged for being wrong. so they stop trying. Creative thinking develops when children are allowed to ask why instead of being told. Because that is the rule, multiple solutions are encouraged. Instead of one correct path, effort and reasoning are valued more than speed or perfection. A simple example: if a child struggles with a math problem, instead of immediately showing them the solution, ask, how did you approach it? What part confused you? What would you try differently next time? This builds metacognition, the ability to think about how you think, which is one of the strongest predictors of long-term learning and adaptability. Why this matters for the future. With technology and AI handling memorization and data, human value increasingly comes from flexible thinking, ethical judgment, innovation pattern, recognition across disciplines. Kids who are never taught how to think, only what to remember, struggle later with confidence, decision-making, and self-trust. Problem-solving isn't about being smart. It's about being willing to engage, to fail forward, and to refine your thinking over time. And that's a skill that shapes not just students, but future adults.
One of the biggest gaps in modern education isn't intelligence, discipline, or motivation. It's emotional regulation. Most schools expect children to already know how to sit still, focus, manage frustration, handle rejection, and stay calm under pressure, without ever teaching them how. From a psychological standpoint, this is backwards. A child who is emotionally dysregulated cannot learn effectively. Their nervous system is in survival mode, not learning mode. When the brain feels unsafe, it prioritizes protection, not curiosity, memory, or creativity. Emotional regulation is not about controlling emotions. It's about recognizing them, understanding them, and knowing what to do with them. Children who aren't taught this often grow up overreacting to stress, shutting down when overwhelmed, avoiding challenges, or becoming anxious. Perfectionists, not because they are weak, but because no one taught them how to work with their internal state. Healthy emotional education teaches kids to notice what they were feeling without shame. Understand why a reaction is happening, pause instead of impulsively reacting, recover after mistakes or conflict. This is directly tied to nervous system regulation, learning how to move between effort and rest, focus and release, stress and recovery. A simple example: if a child melts down over a mistake, the goal isn't punishment or dismissal. It's asking, what just happened inside you? That question builds awareness instead of fear. Over time, emotionally regulated children develop stronger, focus better, problem-solving more resilience, healthier. Relationships, they don't learn to avoid discomfort. They learn how to move through it. In a world that's fast, overstimulating, and increasingly demanding, emotional regulation isn't optional. It's a foundational life skill. And when kids are taught how to understand themselves internally, they don't just perform better, they grow into adults who trust themselves.
One of the biggest shifts happening right now is the realization that information is no longer the advantage. With AI, search engines, and instant access to knowledge, memorization is no longer what makes someone intelligent or successful. What matters now is how a person thinks, not how much they can recall. This is where modern education is falling behind. Psychologically, humans thrive when they're taught how to reason, reflect, and connect ideas, not just repeat them. Yet many school systems are still built on industrial-era models that reward obedience, speed, and test performance over understanding. The future belongs to skills that machines cannot replace: critical thinking, emotional intelligence, creativity, ethics and discernment, intuition and embodied awareness. These are deeply human capacities. When children are encouraged to ask why instead of just what, their brains develop differently. They learn to tolerate uncertainty, explore multiple perspectives, and form independent conclusions, skills that support lifelong learning. For example, two students can learn the same fact. One memorizes it for a test. The other connects it to real life, questions its impact, and applies it creatively. Only one of those students is being prepared for the future. Teaching human intelligence means encouraging curiosity over compliance, allowing mistakes as part of learning, valuing insight over speed, and teaching kids how to think, not what to think. When education focuses on human uniqueness, students don't just become smarter, they become more self-aware, adaptable, and resilient. And in a world where machines handle the data, human wisdom becomes the real currency. That's not a soft skill. That's survival.
One of the most outdated ideas in education is that success comes from memorizing information. That model made sense during the industrial era, when jobs were predictable and systems changed slowly. But psychologically and neurologically, the world children are growing up in now is nothing like that. The future doesn't reward people who know the most facts. It rewards people who can adapt. Adaptability is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn without collapsing when things change. From a psychology perspective, adaptability develops when children are exposed to problem solving without a single right answer, trial and error without punishment, and situations where flexibility is required, not perfection. Yet many school systems still train students to look for approval, grades, and external validation before they trust their own thinking. This creates adults who are highly educated, but afraid to pivot. A more effective approach is project-based and interdisciplinary learning. When kids work on real-world problems, they're forced to integrate logic, creativity, communication, and emotional regulation. For example, building a project that combines history, science, and storytelling teaches far more than isolating each subject into separate silos. Another crucial skill is learning how to learn. That means teaching children how to research, how to question sources, how to recognize when something isn't working, and how to adjust without self-judgment. When adaptability becomes the foundation, failure stops being personal. It becomes informative. This builds psychological resilience. The students who thrive long-term aren't the ones who never struggle. They're the ones who know how to change strategies without giving up. Adaptability isn't just an academic skill, it's a mental health skill. And in a world that will continue to shift faster than any generation before it, that may be the most important lesson of all.
Most education systems believe they are preparing kids for the future by teaching them how to use technology. But knowing how to use a tool is not the same as understanding its impact. That's the difference between digital literacy and digital wisdom. Digital literacy teaches how to click, post, search, and consume. Digital wisdom teaches when, why, and at what cost. Psychologically, this matters more than ever. Children today are growing up inside algorithmic systems designed to capture attention, influence behavior, and shape identity before critical thinking is fully developed. Without guidance, kids don't just use technology, they are used by it. Digital wisdom includes understanding how algorithms reward outrage, comparison, and extremes, how attention is monetized, and how constant stimulation impacts memory, mood, and nervous system regulation. Many adults don't realize this either, which means kids are often blamed for behaviors that are being conditioned. Another overlooked skill is media discernment. Not everything that feels true is true. Not everything that's popular is accurate, and not everything repeated is wisdom. Teaching children how to question information, not just absorb it, protects their autonomy. There's also the issue of attention hygiene. Psychologically, the brain needs boredom, silence, and uninterrupted focus to develop creativity and emotional regulation. Constant scrolling fragments this process. Digital wisdom teaches children how to notice overstimulation, when to step away, and how to self-regulate instead of dissociate. Technology itself isn't the enemy. Unconscious use is. When kids understand how systems influence them, they don't need constant restriction. They develop internal boundaries. And internal boundaries are far more powerful than external rules. In a future dominated by technology, the most empowered individuals won't be the most connected. They'll be the most conscious.
Most modern education systems were built during industrial and colonial eras. Their goal wasn't to nurture individuality or wisdom. It was to standardize, control, and produce predictable workers. That legacy still shows. Many school systems center one worldview, one history, one way of thinking, while quietly dismissing or erasing others. Psychologically, this creates a problem. When children never see their culture, ancestry, or way of knowing reflected in education, they internalize the idea that their perspective is less valid. This disconnect affects self-worth, belonging, and identity development. Culturally adaptive education as something different. It teaches that there is more than one way to understand the world. Indigenous science, oral traditions, somatic knowledge, and relational intelligence aren't less advanced. They read different forms of intelligence that modern systems often overlook. When children are exposed to multiple worldviews, they become better critical thinkers. They're less likely to adopt rigid belief systems. They develop empathy instead of superiority. There's also a global awareness component. Kids need to understand that their choices, what they buy, eat, consume, and share, affect people and ecosystems far beyond their immediate environment. This isn't about guilt. It's about responsibility and interconnection. Psychologically, global awareness reduces us versus them thinking and increases emotional maturity. It teaches children that they're part of a larger system, not the center of it. Education that honors cultural diversity doesn't confuse children. It grounds them. It teaches them how to navigate difference without fear, curiosity without dominance, and leadership without erasure. A future-ready education system doesn't produce identical minds. It cultivates humans who can move between worlds, respectfully, intelligently, and consciously.
One of the biggest gaps in modern education isn't intelligence, it's nervous system regulation. Children are taught what to think, but almost never taught how to regulate what they feel. Psychologically, this creates adults who are highly informed but emotionally dysregulated. An overwhelmed nervous system can't access logic, empathy, or creativity, no matter how smart someone is. When a child doesn't understand their stress responses, they grow up thinking anxiety means something is wrong with them, anger means they're bad, shutdown means they're lazy. In reality, these are biological survival responses, not personality flaws. Emotional regulation education teaches children how to recognize, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, what stress feels like in the body. How to return to baseline without shame. This is where somatic awareness matters. Breath, posture, movement, rhythm, and sensory input all directly regulate the nervous system. A child who learns how to calm their body learns how to calm their mind. Trauma-informed psychology shows us something important. Children don't need constant comfort. They need co-regulation. First, then self-regulation. That means adults modeling calm, not demanding it. Schools that integrate emotional literacy see fewer behavioral issues, better focus and learning retention, stronger peer relationships. This isn't soft education, it's biological reality. In a digital world that constantly overstimulates attention and emotion, nervous system skills become as essential as reading and math. When children understand their inner world, they don't grow up afraid of it. They grow up resilient, self-aware, and capable of responding instead of reacting, and that's a skill no algorithm can replace.
Why deep learning matters more than fast content. We live in an era of instant access. Information is fast, endless, and constantly available. But learning is not the same as consuming content. Psychologically, deep learning requires time, reflection, and integration, not speed. When children are pushed to move quickly from topic to topic, the brain stays in surface-level processing. Facts may be memorized, but meaning is rarely formed. Neuroscience shows that learning becomes durable only when the brain has time to pause, connect ideas, make mistakes, revisit concepts. This is how information turns into understanding. Fast content trains the brain to expect constant stimulation. Deep learning trains the brain to tolerate uncertainty, curiosity, and effort. That tolerance is where critical thinking develops. When kids are allowed to sit with not knowing, they learn how to explore rather than perform. Performance-driven systems reward speed, grades, and output, but they often punish depth, questions, and slower processing styles. Over time, this creates adults who fear being wrong, avoid complex problems, confuse confidence with understanding. Deep learning environments do the opposite. They build spaciousness into education, time to synthesize, question, and reflect. This also supports mental health. A nervous system that is constantly rushed stays in mild survival mode. A regulated pace allows creativity, emotional stability, and insight to emerge. In a world where AI can deliver answers instantly, the human advantage becomes integration. Knowing how to think matters more than knowing what to recall. Education that honors depth over speed doesn't fall behind the future. It prepares children to meet it with wisdom,